Hello fellow gamers, I'm Christopher Chrisman of Retro Game Network, and coming up next, a look at our previously featured retro video game news stories on the RGN files for the week ending Saturday, April 13, 2019. Before we begin this week's podcast, we wanted to take an opportunity to apologize and explain our absence over the course of the past several weeks. This contributor to RGN was having computer issues that needed to be taken care of, which made it impossible to provide regular updates. All of these issues have since been taken care of, and we'd like to take the opportunity to say thank you for your continued support. We are currently back on track and look forward to bringing everybody the daily retro video game news that you can count on. With all this in mind, here's a look at our coverage over the course of the past several weeks. In the RGN files this week, Sega has officially announced a quarter of the titles that will be included in their upcoming Sega Genesis mini console. Sega had announced the new plug-and-play device about 1 year ago to coincide with the 30th anniversary of its 16-bit system. However, this was later delayed due to quality control measures. This ultimately had the company no longer working in conjunction with ACT Games in regards to the devices, who had previously worked with Sega to bring the Genesis Flash back to stores previously. The new unit will include the device itself, which is a 55% to scale model of the original Sega Genesis console, and will offer HDMI output at 720p. In North America, you will also get a standard 3-button controller, while Japanese units will receive a 6-button input. Another feature of notice is the Save Anywhere feature, which will allow for save states at any time. The system will ultimately include a total of 40 games from the 16-bit library. However, as of right now, only 10 of these games have officially been announced. The games authenticated to be included are Altered Beast, Castlevania Bloodlines, Comic Zone, Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, Echo the Dolphin, Gunstar Heroes, Shining Force, Sonic the Hedgehog, Space Harrier 2, and Toe Jam and Earl. Sega will be making future announcements on the remaining 30 titles that will be included on the device as we approach the release of the system. The Sega Genesis mini console is scheduled to be released on September 19th of this year and should cost approximately $60 with one controller or $80 with two. New information has been made available in regards to the upcoming Antstream video game streaming service. Based out of the United Kingdom, Antstream plans to offer a collection of games in an on-demand setting similar to the newly launched Switch Online Services NES offerings. The service will be highly favored by gamers that played titles originally released on computers, such as the Commodore Amiga, C64, and ZX Spectrum. However, arcade titles and a handful of Sega Genesis titles will also be included. Some of the popular offerings come from companies like SNK, Codemasters, Jalico, Data East, and Epix. When the service launches, it will include over 400 games, with 2,000 additional games officially being secured for future releases. The people behind the new service have begun a Kickstarter campaign as a method of setting up initial subscriptions. A pledge of $37 will gain you access to Antstream when it launches, alongside of privileges being active for a total of 6 months. You will also gain access to an exclusive Kickstarter backers Discord channel as well. Pledging $56 will also give you 1 year of access, including trying out the service exclusively before anybody else can. Lifetime accounts are also being offered for a pledge of $307. Homebrew developers will also have a special option, as a pledge of $517 will not only give you lifetime access to the service, but will also grant independent developers a new distribution contract for their retro creations, which will also generate revenue for their creation. The product will be available for the PC and Mac, alongside of a version for the Xbox platform. It will also be available for Android at launch and will be ported to iOS devices at a later date. The crowdfunding period will be ending on May 10th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Previously on the RGN files, a never-before-released or even announced prototype game for the NES called UWC Wrestling has been discovered for the very first time. The game was developed by Japanese studio Sita, who created the game during the time period when the wrestling industry was going through several changes. It was during this time that Ted Turner was buying Jim Crockett Promotions. Around this time, UWC stood for Universal Wrestling Corporation and may have been a placeholder name while such overhauls were being finalized, specifically with World Championship Wrestling, or WCW. Some of the wrestlers and personas found within the game include such legends as Ric Flair, Sting, Bobby Eaton, as well as the Road Warriors. Development had begun in 1989 and ultimately was programmed enough to be placed into a playable state, however was never finished or released to the public. The prototype cartridge was recently purchased by Stephen Reese, who is also known on YouTube as Archon1981, from an undisclosed former Nintendo employee as a review cartridge, who was given the game to test and debug back in the day. Reese has also mentioned that he plans to, quote, not keep the game hostage, end quote, and intends to make a ROM image of the cartridge available to the public. However, he is holding off on doing so until he decides exactly how he, quote, wants to go around doing that, end quote. We at Retro Game Network will keep everybody up to date with the latest developments in regards to the publication of this previously unreleased prototype. When you think of xenomorphs and the Predators, exactly how often do you think of the gridiron? Well, one video game concept may have given fans of the Alien vs. Predator franchise such an opportunity indeed. While a video game based on the series was released for the Super NES in 1993, another game would have brought the franchise to the football field in a canceled game called Cosmic Hard Bowl. The title, which was planned for the Sega Genesis platform, was ultimately canceled, with no ROM image or prototype cartridge known to exist. However, recently, the National Video Game Museum shared some interesting information about the game that never was. Set to take place in the year 2702, the museum shared with the public a variety of pieces of concept artwork that had been previously created for the unreleased game. Based on this shared artwork, the title would have been taken place at various football stadiums throughout the United States. Because the artwork shown off has mostly text in the Japanese language, there is a possibility that it was planned originally by a Japanese developer. However, this has not yet been confirmed. Since the original tweets shared by the museum, a variety of fans of the Alien vs. Predator franchise have expressed an interest in seeing more, if anything else does in fact exist, in regards to the unreleased title. Twitter users have shared their viewpoints, believing that it could have been one of the best games made for the Sega Genesis, and one goes on to say, quote, forget about Madden, I want next generation Alien vs. Predator football, PS5 launch, end quote. We will let everybody know if any future information or prototypes become available to the general public. And finally this week, a new clone of the Activision classic Crackpots was recently released, with a unique twist in the storyline. The homebrew title, called Ninja Gardening Simulator, was published for the ZX Spectrum computer system, and is the creation of a programmer named Andrew Bunker. Instead of throwing flower pots on top of spiders like in the original game, this time around you play the part of a ninja who is taking care of his plants at the end of a long day, when all of a sudden a rival ninja clan begins to attack your compound. The only thing that you're armed with at your home is an endless supply of potted plants. Your mission is to throw these said pots on the heads of the rival clan members to prevent them from entering your apartment complex. If 6 out of the 12 members of a single fleet are able to penetrate, they will go onto the ground floor and destroy part of the apartment building. Bunker calls his creation, quote, a powerful and accurate depiction of ninja botany, end quote. Ninja Gardening Simulator has been released as a free game that is available as a digital download and is able to be played not only on your favorite ZX Spectrum emulator of choice, but also on actual equipment as well. The TAF file can be run on any ZX Spectrum that has either 48K or 128K of RAM, and can be loaded via your choice of either an SD card loader or by playing the file as an audio file directly into the computer by means of a native audio cassette or other medium. There are currently no plans for an official physical release of the game at this time. That's it for this week's edition of the RGN Files. For those listening on BGM on FM, please stay tuned. There'll be more video game music coming up shortly. For complete details of any of the stories featured in this podcast, visit RetroGameNetwork.com. And don't forget to follow us on our social media outlets on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Retro Game Network, and on Twitter and Twitch at RetroGameNet. For the RGN Files, I'm Christopher Chrisman. Stories for this podcast provided by the following: Bloody Disgusting, comicbook.com, Engadget, Kickstarter, Mashable, Polygon, The Sci-Fi Channel, TechSpot, Vintage is the New Old, WrestleZone.